Last Epoch 1.0 is finally here tomorrow, so with this video, I wanted to take a moment to go through all of the different masteries in the game and also the 2 new ones that are coming, and give my opinion of a tier list of how good these are going to be for somebody who is brand new to Last Epoch or just coming back. Say you don't have many characters yet, maybe this will be like your 2nd or 3rd character, you haven't farmed up a ton of gear in your stash. This is going to be the tier list for you. This is going to be very similar to an overall mastery tier list, but a couple things have been moved around just with those things in consideration. This is all my opinion, and there's a ton of balance changes coming, so maybe something won't play out exactly as I think, but this is my educated guess after reading the patch notes and after playing every single mastery so far in the game. So this is all going to be all of that knowledge put into one, so hopefully you guys do find it helpful and make a good starting choice. If you have any differing opinions, let me know in the comments down below. Help out your fellow players. If there's something maybe like a build I didn't consider for a class, definitely let me know in the comments down below. I did want to preface whatever I end up putting in this tier list in whatever spot. At the end of the day, whatever mastery looks the best to you in terms of the most fun, what skills you think are the coolest, pick that one first. That is the beauty of Last Epoch, is everything can do everything. You can build into whatever you want. So play into that power fantasy that you want to strive for and pick the character that you really want to play. Yeah, I'm going to be streaming all day over on Twitch. We're going to be running a Falconer build to start out to 1.0. So if that sounds interesting to you, hopefully I'll see you over there. But let's go ahead and jump into this tier list. So I'm just going to start with base classes and go from there. So we're going to start off with the Sentinel and specifically the Forge Guard. The Forge Guard was actually a class I was not super excited about playing, but after I'd played it for quite a bit, it feels really, really good, and I think it's going to be a very solid choice for a starting player. It has a ton of defenses and can also dish out really good damage. I did a little bit of manifest armor shenanigans, also some shield throw, which has been quite a bit of fun. I know that was something that was very powerful in the past, and even just here right before release, it was still feeling really good, but there's a ton of other things you can do. All of the forge weapons still feel really good, and they were actually really quick in the leveling process. Just having a bunch of swords going around, killing everything for you really helps out speed up the process. And just the overall biggest thing that I wanted to take into consideration for this tier list is just how easy it is to get your defenses up, because Last Epoch, once you make it to the monoliths and you're starting to push through those, it's really going to test your survivability. Some of the classes are just significantly squishier than others. Also with a lot of the stunning, it really helps out to have a lot of health and a lot of defenses to go with that. And there's a lot of times in some of these build videos out there where these people have like 3,000 plus HP, and that is not the easiest thing to do. You need like hybrid health and health on almost every single piece, also while maintaining all of your different resistances. Like, it takes a lot of work to get all of those pieces perfectly, and it's really gonna skew how these builds are actually feeling for your average player who isn't farming for hundreds of hours per character. Yeah, overall, the Forge Guard, like I said, feels really, really good. I think I'm going to end up slotting this in an A tier. I think it's just really good to get survivability on this character. You can stack up a ton of armor and block chance and all of that good stuff to help you survive, while also dishing out really good damage to both groups and to bosses. Next up, we have the Void Knight. The really cool thing about the Void Knight is you can end up playing this as a melee build with like Erasing Strike and Void Cleave, or you can do kind of more a caster thing with Devouring Orb, Abyssal Echoes, stuff like that. So there's a lot of flexibility in what kind of build you want to be running with this mastery, which is really nice. Also, it's just a Sentinel class, so it's going to offer you a ton of survivability. You're going to get your HP pool up really high. A lot of your spells are going to scale off of Vitality, which is going to give you more health and more survivability. So there's just a lot going for the Void Knight that you can put together. You can shape it into basically whatever you want, and overall, I think this feels really good. It's also going to be joining our Forge Guard in the A tier. Rounding up the last of the Sentinel classes, we have the Paladin. This is one of the classes that I played early on in my time in Last Epoch, and it did not disappoint at all. This was one of my easiest times going from level 1, and I'm up to like level 90 something right now on my Paladin, and I haven't played in a while, and even then it still feels really good. I was just doing a smite build, but there's a ton of different things you can do. You can do like Holy Trail Javelin, there's like hammered in stuff you can do. There's all sorts of different play styles that you can pick with Paladin, and all of them, you're going to dish out a ton of damage, and you're also going to be incredibly tanky with all of the healing you can put out. Also, it's getting the new skill tree for the healing hands or whatever the skill is that hasn't had a skill tree. So there's going to be a lot to play around with the Paladin. And overall, I think this is one of the best choices you can make in terms of a first character. It's going to make you be able to go from level 1 to 100, farm up for all of your other characters, and the best part is it really does not require any uniques whatsoever. There is a Smite amulet which you can farm a little bit later on, but even without that amulet you can still do really well. So there's a lot of flexibility, a lot to be done with the Paladin, and it's going to be rounding out our first S tier. Moving on over to the Acolyte. The Acolyte is a really, really strong class with 3 really good masteries. And the first one we're going to be talking about is the Lich. Now, the Lich is incredibly powerful, but the thing that really holds it back, at least for a starting character, is a lot of the builds for this class are going to require a lot of uniques. All of these low life things really get helped out by uniques, and there's just a lot going for it that revolve around those uniques. So if you have really bad luck, you might be stuck for a while trying to get your build completely online and going. There are builds out there that obviously don't require uniques, but for the most part, a lot of them do, and I really think it holds back the Lich. But once you do get those, it is incredibly powerful. So this is one of those scenarios where it's going to differ a lot from just like an overall tier list, because just as a starting class, it's going to be a little bit weaker and harder to get going. So that's why I'm going to end up putting it in the B tier. Otherwise, once you do have all those things, it's an easy A to S tier depending on your build. The second of the Acolyte masteries is going to be the Necromancer. Now, the Necromancer is one that I put off playing for a while just because I'm not a huge fan of like minion playstyles. But let me tell you, this felt really good. This is one of the best minion playing setups that I have run in any game so far. Normally, I'm just not a huge fan dealing with their AI. But in this game, they're fast. They deal a lot of damage and will clear fast for you. So I was actually a big fan of the Necromancer. The leveling experience was incredibly easy, and you can focus really into surviving because you can send them in to do all of the work, and there's a bunch of different ways you can play the Necromancer. There's a bunch of race you can use. You can use the summon skeletons, your golems. There's a bunch of different things you can do with the Necromancer depending on what minion you think is the coolest. So there's just a lot going for the Necromancer. It just makes your life incredibly easy, and you're really never going to have a bad time with this class. So that's why I'm going to be joining it with the Paladin over in our S tier. I did want to make my prediction on the new mastery coming, the Warlock for the Acolyte. I think this is going to be incredibly strong, but I think it's going to be a little bit more reliant on uniques, sort of like the Lich, but maybe not quite as heavy. Usually, at least if the Runemaster was any indication, when they release these masteries, they're going to end up being pretty dang strong. So I think this is going to be a solid choice for you to pick. So if this looks like a class that looks like a lot of fun, you like the skills, I would definitely start with this. I don't think you're really going to have a rough time. And it's something that's really going to jump in power as you get those uniques, as you farm your empowered monoliths. So right now, I do predict the Warlock is going to be very strong. I'm going to put it in A tier to be a little conservative, but I could easily see this being an S tier option as well. Moving on over to our Primalist, we're going to be looking at the Shaman Mastery first. This one, I was actually very pleasantly surprised with how well this did in terms of leveling and going through some monoliths. I think this felt fantastic using the Storm Totem. I did a lot of lightning. I did some Maelstrom. Overall, it felt fantastic, and it was actually going very quickly too. There wasn't anything that I was struggling on or clearing slowly lift. I really felt like the Shaman was a very strong choice, so that's why I'm also going to be putting it in the A tier. Next up, we have the Beastmaster, and this is going to be focused on a lot of minion stuff, and these minions are very powerful. But the really cool thing about Beastmaster is you can do other builds with it. So with my Beastmaster, I did a Totem Shatter build, which I thought was really cool, shattering all these Thorn Totems with Upheaval, and it does a ton of damage. This is one of the best boss killing builds that I'd use, and it clears fairly quickly for the most part, but there's a ton of flexibility with what you can do with the Beastmaster, so don't think of it just as a minion class, kind of like the Necromancer. there is a lot more going for this, and you really don't need a lot of uniques for this. There are a couple builds that are a little bit more idol dependent, so like that Shatter Totem setup that I'm doing is really not all of that possible until you get some good idols. But for the most part, I think the Beastmaster is a really good choice. It's also going to be going into our A tier. Rounding out our prime list, we're going to be looking at the Druid. The Druid has a bunch of different ways you can play, and there's a lot of different skills you can use, considering whenever you change into a new form, you're going to get a new set of skills, and those skills are going to play off of existing skills for the prime list. So it makes a lot of flexibility in what you can do, and depending on what skills you like, it's going to depend on what form you end up going into, whether you want to do Bear, Spriggan, the Swarmblade. There's a lot you can do. I personally played a Spriggan setup with this with the Thorn Totems, and it felt really good because honestly, one of the best ways of surviving in this game is just having things do damage as you're moving around. So that's why the minion stuff is really powerful. You don't have to focus on getting hit while you're trying to dish out damage. You can just place things down and run around and end up surviving. So that was one thing that I did with my Spriggan, is I did a lot of Thorn Totems with it. So I'd place those down, run around in my Spriggan form, and it overall felt really good applying a bunch of poison, having those thorns just clear out everything. It felt really quick and was easily one of the better leveling experiences I had and going into the monolith. So our Druid is going to end up going into the S tier. I highly recommend it if you're into that playstyle. Taking a look at the Rogue, this is obviously getting the new Falconer mastery, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But there is a lot that can be said about this in terms of this specific tier list. So looking at the Bladedancer first, I think this is going to be the most apparent with the discrepancies here. So overall, I think the Bladedancer is one of the strongest and fastest classes in the entire game. I think it feels really good. This is personally what I started Last Epoch on. This was my very first class, and it did feel really good, but I did hit a point of frustration where I was just dying nonstop. It took a lot to get the survivability worked out because it's a rogue. It's just how this playstyle is going to go. So that's going to depend completely on the person, whether you vibe with that or not. So this is where it can range significantly. I can see people wanting to put Bladedancer in like B tier if you have a really tough time surviving, or if you really know what you're doing, you're into that really active and fast playstyle, you could put in the S tier. So I'm going to go right in the middle and end up putting it in A tier. But this one, completely up to your play style, but I do recommend playing it at some point, and you really do not need any uniques whatsoever for this class, which is a big bonus. Looking at the Marksman, I think this is something that's going to be helped out immensely by the new Falconer class coming, with the explosive traps coming and the nets. I think this is just going to help out this class a lot. Right now, without the Falconer, I'd probably put this in like C tier, possibly, just because it does do really good damage, but like I was saying earlier with surviving, you're on a rogue, which is already very squishy, but then all the damage you have to do essentially is while you're standing still, maybe except for like rain of arrows. But for the most part, you're going to be standing still, getting really close to enemies if you're trying to like shotgun with multi-shot, things like that. And there's a lot to balance in terms of mana with like a generator and one that just deals a lot of damage by using a lot of mana. So there's a lot going on here, but I do, once again, think it's going to be helped out a lot by the Falconers. So right now, I'm going to end up putting this into B tier, but if you do enjoy the bow play styles, I do recommend this as a good starting class. The new Falconer, I think, is going to be one of the best classes in the entire game. The way the Falcon scales off of your like damage, I think, is fantastic. Also, the fact that the Falcon never dies, you don't have to worry about speccing into any sort of minion survivability, which just helps you stack on more damage in the rogue fashion, and you can just let that thing deal with all of the enemies while you stay alive and focus on your survivability with dodges, glancing blows, all of that good stuff. So I think the Falconer is going to be a very, very, very good choice as your first character. Like I said, this is what I'm going to be playing tomorrow. So if you guys are interested in any builds with that, that's going to be coming up first here on the channel in terms of builds. So once again, Falconer, really good choice. I think this is going to be an easy S tier, and I do not think I'm going to be wrong about that one. On to our final base class of the Mage. I've played a ton of mages in terms of Sorcerer and Runemaster. I've played those probably the most out of any two classes so far, and they have been a really good experience. Unfortunately, Runemaster did receive a bit of changes here going into 1.0, but let's go ahead and start off by talking about Runemaster as the first mage mastery. So, like I said, this had received quite a few nerfs because it was incredibly overpowered. this was by far the best class that I had used, all the way from level 1, and I think I'm like level 95, 96 on it right now, and doing a couple hundred corruption monoliths was still just a breeze. I'm like sprinting through everything. It is so good, and I wasn't even doing like the meta Hydra setups. I was doing some like Frostwall, Flame Ward, Retaliation, and Glyph of Dominion. So there's a lot of things you can do with the Runemaster. It does sort of invalidate the other two masteries a little bit, which is pretty funny. So if you are going to pick a mage setup, almost no matter what you're doing, unless it's a very specific thing with Spellblade or Sorcerer that the Runemaster doesn't have access to, I do recommend this as your mage class, and I would still end up putting this here in S tier. Despite all of its changes, I still think it's going to be a really good choice because you're going to still get a ton of ward, even though they nerfed a lot of the generators for the ward on the Runemaster. I still think it's going to be very strong, and I think you're going to have a really good time if you're interested in a mage class as your first setup. Now for Spellblade, I did just want to say this is the class that I've played the least in the game, but also I've just not seen anything from it that I've really been a big fan of. And the few Spellblade things would be like Enchant Weapon. That has a really cool thing where you can actually consume all of the ignite stacks on an enemy and have them deal up to 200% more damage. So that is a really cool thing you can do, but it's not exclusive to the Spellblade. So if you're going to end up doing a setup like that, you're going to play that on Sorcerer or Runemaster. So overall, I think the Spellblade is on the weaker side. I don't really recommend this. This is going to be our lowest ranking so far, and I will put it in the C tier. Nothing in this game is bad or weak. I just think it's weaker than everything else, so that's why it is getting that rating. If you're interested in that playstyle, I do recommend still playing it. That is the awesome part about Last Epoch, is everything can be good. I just think this is very hard to set up and gets invalidated by a lot of other things, so that's why it is getting our C tier ranking. And now for our 15th and final mastery to talk about, we're going to be looking at the Sorcerer. I was a big Sorcerer fan. If you guys are here from Diablo, you know I'm a Sorcerer main. So there's a lot to love about this. There's a lot of cool things you can do. Volcanic Orb is sick. Also, when you combine it with the Enchant Weapon thing that I was talking about with the Spellblade, you can do some very big pops. You can also combine it with Runemaster for big pops with that. But anyways, the Sorcerer has a lot of cool things going for it. I did a Ball Lightning build when I was first playing this game, and I thought that was a lot of fun. So there's a lot of cool things you can do, but once again, the Runemaster is just better, and I think Sorcerer is just a little bit on the weaker side, but you can get a lot of crit chance and crit damage. You're going to be guaranteed crits on a lot of your skills, and they're going to be doing a good amount of damage with those crits. So that is a very good ease of use part of that. But once again, there are going to be some uniques that you're going to need for certain setups. So this is going to fall a little bit lower on this list. And right now I'd end up putting that into the B tier with our Lich and Marksman. Yeah, that is all of our 15 masteries ranked. Just to go over it again, I'll have the tier list up on screen. In our S tier, we're going to have Paladin, Necro, Druid, Falconer, and Runemaster. In our A tier, Forge Guard, Void Knight, our Warlock, our Shaman, Beastmaster, and Bladedancer. And then in our B tier, we're going to have Lich, Marksman, and our Sorcerer. And then down in our C tier is going to be our Spellblade. Once again, if you have any differing opinions, or maybe there's some builds that I haven't tried that would greatly change the ranking of these, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hopefully you are excited to jump into Last Epoch 1.0 tomorrow. Once again, I will be streaming it all day long, playing a Falconer, so if you're interested in seeing that, make sure you come on over to the stream. Also consider subscribing for more Last Epoch content. We're going to have a ton of builds on the channel. I have a bunch of stuff already made. Like I said, I've played every single mastery so far, and I have a build for essentially each one of them at this point. So I will be sharing those once I get them sorted out with all the 1.0 changes and all of that good stuff. So once again, thank you guys for watching so much. I really do appreciate it. But anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you all in the next video. See ya.